Joseph Newgarden is a winner again in IndyCar in what was an incredibly tight finish. In today's race review, we'll be going over our general thoughts of the race, the winners and losers of the weekend, before handing it over to you guys and getting your thoughts. But first, we are very excited to announce that we have a new sponsor in the American Monoposto Championship. So here's a quick word from our sponsors of this video.
This race review is presented by the American Monoposto Championship, inspired by the 1998 kart season. Check out the most entertaining open-wheel sim racing series to date on YouTube and Discord.
Sim racing has really kind of grown in the last few years, I think, especially over COVID when there wasn't really any on-track action happening. So with the rise in this industry, leagues like this have come up, and the American Monoposto Championship seems a really great one. Why wouldn't you want to go and check that out? April 9th is the start of that season. Those 90s kart cars looked great, so it's going to be brilliant to see how that championship unfolds. I'll certainly be tuning in, and thank you for sponsoring this video. I hope you guys go out and check out their championship as well. I will leave the link to the YouTube channel and obviously their social medias in the description down below. But now getting on with the race review. Now you'll notice, obviously, in slightly different surroundings. Usually we film at mine and Stephen's mum's house on the traditional sofa, but this is the sofa in my flat. So yeah, just so you're not going, hang on a minute, where is Mike? This is unusual circumstances, to put you at ease. But I think where we first got to start off with is Joseph Newgarden. P16 in St. Pete was a real struggle for him that weekend, especially seeing his other two teammates in Scott Mclaughlin win the race and Will Power come home in P3. It was a really superb performance from Joseph Newgarden to bounce back. He looked confident all weekend, even sacrificing 15 minutes of practice time because he just felt so good in his car that he knew he was going to deliver. And at stages, it looked like he drifted too far from Scott Mclaughlin, but then traffic played into his hands, and it really played into his hands on that last lap with Mclaughlin not being able to find a way past David Malukas. And that was how he was able to slingshot past Scott Mclaughlin, who had led 186 of the laps at Texas. Tough luck for Scott Mclaughlin, but a brilliant last ditch and really close. I think the victory margin was 0.669 seconds for Joseph Newgarden. So a fantastic drive for him and a really great way to bounce back. Another guy, and I think, well, the second guy we have to talk about is the guy who was P2 in the race and P1 and championship leader still, after obviously winning St. Pete and coming second here, is Scott Mclaughlin. Now, I think we thought Texas was going to be a great race for him. It was his best result in 2021, where he finished P2 behind Scott Dixon. And I think, you know, falling behind Scott Dixon, who was very experienced at Texas, and now Team Penske and Joseph Newgarden, who's experienced winning at Texas before, I believe that's probably where he just fell short this time out. Obviously, he had a much better chance of winning than when he first raced. It was more Scott Dixon dominating that race in Texas last year. But this time, it was Scott Mclaughlin who dominated the race for a large portion. But on ovals, you never know how that traffic's going to come into play. He drove the best race that he could. It's going to feel gutting for Scott Mclaughlin, but hopefully not too gutting for him, because like we said with Alex Palou in St. Pete, if you ain't going to finish first, coming second in kind of maximising the best result you can is all you can do. And I think we can now start to say Scott Mclaughlin, if Team Penske carry on this momentum, because obviously Will Power came home in P4 as well, meaning that within the first two races, they've had double podiums in both races. And, well, obviously, Will Power was much better fourth than Joseph Newgarden, 16th in St. Pete. But they are really looking competitive out there, and they really look like they've made a step up. And, you know, Penske are the most successful team at the Indy 500. And I feel this was a statement piece to them to say, look, we're going to be back and we're really going to be challenging for the 500 this year. 2018, 2019, obviously two drivers, one Will Power, 2018, Simon Pagenaud, who's now with Meyershank Racing, 2019, dropped off the past couple of years since this first introduction of the aero screen, with Scott Dixon and Elio Castro-Neves winning in Honda-based entries as well. But Chevy and Team Penske look like they're driving together, and it was superb performance. But back to Scott Mclaughlin, yes, I think if Penske continue this momentum, I think you've got a serious championship contender here in Scott McLaughlin. He now looks so comfortable in the series, and he looks so comfortable running at the front of the grid. Now, Long Beach is going to be a fascinating one, and kind of see where he goes. Obviously, you don't know how Penske are going to shape up, but they've done well at St. Petersburg in the street course at the first race of the season. It's another street course in Long Beach, a great racetrack. If Scott McLaughlin can again continue being in and around that top 5 place, then I think you have to say that he is a serious title contender this season. But yes, Penske are looking really, really strong. Top placed out of another team looking strong this season is Marcus Erickson and Chip Ganassi coming in at P3. And Marcus Erickson, St. Pete doesn't really do how well he was running justice, because he had that where he oversteered, I believe, a little bit into Graham Rahal, then squeezed Roman Grosjean in the pits, which saw him receive a penalty in St. Pete, but was able to recover, I believe, back to a top 10 finish. I think he came home 9th in the end, maybe even 10th. But he was running the highest of the Chip Ganassi cars in that race before that penalty, and he finished the highest of the Chip Ganassi cars in this one, which traditionally, Marcus has adapted very well to the ovals courses, but you traditionally say the European drivers do struggle across ovals because it's just something they're completely not used to, and it takes them a few years to get used to. And I suppose Marcus Ericsson's been in the series a few years, so he's got used to it, and he looked really strong. The only one who had some sort of touching distance to McLaughlin and Newgarden at the end, although never looked like he was going to be challenging for that race victory at the end. Traffic didn't kind of play in its hands enough to kind of squeeze Marcus up enough to them. But it was a brilliant drive from the Swedish driver, and can he make that next step up and go from a regular top 10 finisher for Chip Ganassi in the championship to a championship contender? We saw Alex Palou do it last year. We know Ganassi, since the aero screen has been introduced, has really been up there and been, it's traditionally one of the top 3 teams, although it could be a top 2 this year as Andretti's struggles continued, and we'll come on to that. But yeah, Marcus Ericsson really could become a championship contender. P5 and P7 are interesting because, P5, 6 and 7 are interesting because they were all Chip Ganassi cars, meaning it was top 7 completely stacked with the entirety of the teams of Team Penske and Chip Ganassi, which for other teams outside, and Andretti included, Aaron McLaren SPs, Rahal, Letman, Lanigan, Meyer Shank Racings, would be pretty daunting because it looks like these teams have really got their business together. They've basically completely locked down the podiums in the first 2 races. Team Penske, obviously, with 2 drivers on, but, Alex Palou came second in St. Pete and Marcus Ericsson P3 this time. But Scott Dixon, a very steady performance at P5. He'll maybe be slightly disappointed at a track that he's so strong at. He wasn't able to get higher, but he was in and around there all race. He just wasn't able to find that extra step up and progress to be challenging for that lead of the race. P6, we've got to talk about it. Jimmie Johnson, incredible. Here's a guy that when we went onto the ovals, we were going, this is where Jimmy could really shine. The majority of Jimmy's NASCAR wins, obviously being a 7-time champion and a 7-time winner at Texas Motor Speedway itself, you're going, wow, this is what we're really going to see what Jimmie Johnson can do in an IndyCar. And boy, did he deliver. I believe in the broadcasting, they were saying the top 10 they would be over the moon with. They so nearly secured a top 5. Scott Dixon just pipping Jimmie Johnson right near the end. But wow, I think he qualified in the, it was his best ever qualifying performance. And he just progressed and progressed through the race. And what a superb performance. He was, he looked like a natural in the series. He looked like a guy who deserved to be within that Chip Ganassi car and was competing where Chip Ganassi cars you expect them to compete, rather than where he has been on road and street courses. And he's made leaps and bounds and improvements in there in those kind of most difficult courses for him to perform at. But wow, I mean, going into the Indy 500 in May, you wouldn't say, I mean, Elio won last year and he was an outside shot. Ganassi usually have a great car. Obviously, Alex Palou finished second. Scott Dixon had the pole position last year. Look, he's going to have the tools available to him to give it the best damn shot he can give it at the Indy 500. And he's not going anywhere for the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think, Jimmy. Whether that's as a full-time driver or oval-only driver in a couple of years' time, we'll have to wait and see on that front. But it was an absolutely incredible drive. And, you know, it was brilliant to see. You know, a guy who has come with such a huge reputation in NASCAR. And, you know, everyone who's a racing fan can see what a hard challenge it was for Jimmy to do. And I now feel that this performance has vindicated him coming into the series, and you know, all the eyes he's drawn to the series, all the support. I've had people telling me who were there saying that the cheers were so loud for Jimmy when they realised where he was, and you know, he's a real feel-good factor story. Yeah, this is a guy who had achieved it all in NASCAR. He didn't have to come to IndyCar. He could have retired, live a happy life with his family, probably do a load of broadcasting. He could have picked anything that he wanted to do. He was that type of guy. He chose to continue racing in a category of single-seaters that he'd never done in his career before, a very challenging category, speeds faster than what he was used to in NASCAR, and he has thrown himself into it. And I cannot rate this P6 highly enough for Jimmy Johnson, and I'm so excited to see how he progresses on ovals in particular, because I definitely would say that a win is not out of the equation for Jimmy Johnson in the future. And Alex Palou rounding off P7, again does what he does. Didn't really seem the package to complete over the course of the weekend, but yeah, I mean, Alex, he does what he does. Still another strong top 10 finish. It's what you need to do to be a consistent championship contender. P2 last time out, he would have hoped for better than P7, but P7 is by no means a disastrous result. Pagano for Meyershank Racing, the highest placed of the outside teams, higher than an Andretti. And obviously, Meyershank Racing and Andretti have that close technical partnership. And I think we saw it last year with Jack Harvey, that actually the Meyershank car looked very strong at Texas. And it was a brilliant drive from Simon here for large parts of it. I think he started P15 and worked his way up. His teammate Elio Castro-Neves was also running very well, but unfortunately was an innocent bystander in a crash that we will come on to a little bit later on in this video. But yeah, Simon was running as high as 5th, a bit like VK, who did finish P10 in the end. They just couldn't find a way of making that fuel strategy work, and I think it was actually Simon's tyres that went. It was definitely fuel for VK. Couldn't hit the numbers. They didn't quite get their fuel calculations right for the race. But, you know, VK ran as high as 1st as once, and Pagano ran as high as 5th. Really strong performances for that, and, you know, it shows that Pagano, I think, is going to be a force in that Meyershank car. And also VK, again, it's another one that looks like he's back. Strategy didn't quite work out today, but still getting a P10 from the strategy that he was on, I think is a fantastic result. Sandwiched in between those was a guy who came in last minute. Now, obviously, we hope the recovery of Jack Harvey goes pretty well. I think he was all right. He was walking around the racetrack. I saw him with Santino Ferrucci past race, but it was a pretty hefty crash that he had on Saturday, which, you know, I think cracked the tub of the car. It meant that the Rahal Letman Lanigan guys had to bring out their Indy 500 entry, or the car that they're going to enter for the Indy 500 as the spare car. And Ferrucci had to start dead last in P27, and he managed to finish P9. An absolute incredible guy. And, you know, as much as Ferrucci's maybe personality and maybe antics off the track have left much to be desired, what you cannot deny in IndyCar is that he's incredibly talented behind the wheel. I think, you know, that's either the 4th or 5th top 10 finish coming in as a part-time driver. And the fact that he didn't know he was driving until the Sunday morning, I think makes this performance even more impressive. And was an absolute brilliant drive from Santino Ferrucci. On talent alone, he probably deserves a full-time seat within the series, but I don't think that is going to happen. But we will see him again at the Indy 500 with Dry Rainbow Racing. Him and Sage Karam are going to be in the same team. Could be a very interesting lineup. If they can get qualifying high up, both have proven that they can pull out fantastic results at the 500. Maybe an outside shot at a victory. You never know with the Indy 500. But two very, very talented drivers on ovals in particular in Karam and Ferrucci. I'm excited to see how that plays out in the 500 in May. Malukas, the highest placed of the rookies, I think he's done a fantastic bounce back performance. Obviously, he crashed out in St. Pete. Brilliant drive, staying on the lead lap, fighting hard to stay on the lead lap with Scott Mclaughlin at the end there. It was, really brilliant. P11 is a really good return, and his teammate Takuma Sato was running well until an incident with Devlin Di Francesco, which we will come on to. I think someone in the comments said, am I going to call out Devlin Di Francesco for trying to be IndyCar's Maldonado? And for that rookie, it definitely was a day to forget. And Colton Herta, the last, I think, driver to, he finished a lap down. He was the last guy to be overtaken, first of the Andretti's, and it was really a day to forget at the office for Andretti Autosport. We'll come on to, I think, a little bit more detail with them in the winners and losers section of the review. Right. I think we've got to talk about Devlin Di Francesco. Kyle Kirkwood, Takuma Sato having fantastic races, and also you have Helio Castroneves running a fantastic race, and Graham Rahal was making some sort of recovery, and he was similarly around where Jimmy Johnson was, and you never know where Graham might have been able to finish up. He wouldn't have been challenging for a victory of any sorts of that, but he certainly would have backed him to have a somewhat of a comeback drive, as he believed there was pace in the car to recover from obviously the poor qualifying that happened. A terrible day at the office in qualifying for Rahal, Letman, Lanigan. In all, 4 of those retirements, and the 5th car to retire with them was Devlin Di Francesco, and he was the inside car on all 3 of the incidents. And I think you have to say he was a rookie, and he showed his inexperience on the ovals. He got loose, pushed Carl a little bit up into the PJ1 that caused him to crash. Takuma Sato, he bumped into and caused Takuma to crash as well. Although Takuma obviously will feel frustrated because if his race had gone to plan, because Malukas, I believe, had blocked him in the pits, not deliberately in terms of it, but Takuma lost a lot of time in the first round of pit stops, I believe, and that led him to be slightly further back and in Devlin Di Francesco's range, shall we say, of where he coincided. And then obviously he got loose, front right contacted with Rahal's rear left, which sent Rahal right up into the wall, collecting Helio Castroneves along his way. Very inexperienced from Devlin Di Francesco. Not his finest day. A lot to learn. He will obviously learn from the experience, but it's a shame that he cost 4 drivers, especially I would say Kyle Kirkwood. Kyle Kirkwood was on fire. He was flying out there. He would have been, as much as Malukas did a good job to get P11, Kirkwood would have been in that top 10, and it would have been an absolutely superb performance from the AJ Foyt Racing driver. But that's racing. Sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and your race can be over with an incident that maybe isn't even your fault. And like I said, Devlin will learn from it, but it was frustrating to see all those other 4 drivers' races ended early. And yeah, I don't think there would have been too many happy drivers, but they understand what it's like to be a rookie. You don't run many ovals in Indy lights, and yeah, Devlin certainly has yet to find his feet within the series, where Malukas and Kirkwood, who both got promoted from Indy Lights with him, have started to find their feet, that's for sure. I suppose this leads quite into nicely, and we'll go to losers. Andretti Autosport, and we'll talk about Alexander Rossi. Man, I don't even know what to say about Alexander Rossi anymore. I think I said it last year. I think he just needs a clean split from Andretti Autosport. I think too much has now happened within that team. I think they are just in this vicious cycle going down, whether it's driver error or whether it's mechanical failure. There's been so much that has happened in the last 2, now going into 3 years. And yeah, Alex just putting on a brave face again, but felt he had pace in the car. He jumped the start, so that was a driver error. That didn't quite work out, but then before he had a chance to recover, and you could easily recover from that position, I think he was only having to give back 1 place, what he had done. But his power, something to do with the electric power unit. I've forgotten off the top of my head what the actual mechanical failure was, but basically his battery drained and he was gone. he was out of it, and a mechanical failure for Grosjean. His engine looked like it went kaput. Devlin Di Francesco, obviously, we said, as a rookie, being involved in 3 incidents, including the final incident ending his race. And Colton Herta looked the best shaped out of the Andretti boys, but then a problem on his front left tyre during a pit stop sequence where the jack got kind of stuck on it. Yeah, it was a day really to forget for Andretti Autosport. And for me, this is where they're just going to fall short. I said in the preview, I was like, rule Andretti out this weekend. I just feel they haven't been great on ovals, and I just can't see them doing well here at Texas ahead of the Penske's and the Ganassis of the world. And they delivered on that thought. And I was hoping to be wrong. Colton had brilliant pace out there, but yeah, unfortunately for Colton, it just didn't go his way. And it are those little things that are going to happen through the season again that are going to stop him mounting a serious title challenge. I hope not, because he has the talent to do it. But yeah, it was definitely a weekend to forget for Andretti Autosport. Winners of the weekend, obviously the big winners are Team Penske, Joseph Newgarden in particular. Scott McLaughlin will feel like a loser, losing obviously the victory at that last corner, but he's still a big winner, leading the championship. And I believe Will Power is up to 2nd in the championship, having 3rd and 4th. The consistency of those results. So yeah, Team Penske are the biggest winners, and I tell you what, they look like they are back with a vengeance. It took them, I think, 9 races last year to get their first victory. They've now won the first 2 races. And you got to say, going into Long Beach, they're probably going to be favourites with how good their car and team look in the early stages of the season. I know Alan was talking and saying on Twitter he was fearful that this could turn into a little bit of a dominance and a bit of fear for the smaller teams. Absolutely it could. But then there are also 6 drivers within Ganassi and Team Penske who could all be fighting for a title. So it still can be a really exciting title fight, but it may be shaping up that it is going to be Penske versus Ganassi this year. And that's going to be fascinating to see how that unfolds. Go from there. Another loser, McLaren. McLaren were losers in Formula 1. McLaren were losers in IndyCar as well. Pato had a fantastic start doing Pato things again as well. Felix Rosenqvist obviously had a fantastic Saturday qualifying for pole position. I believe his 2nd pole position within the NTT IndyCar series. And, he was driving pretty strong as well. And Pato looked like he was recovering. There looked pace in that car. But then Pato managed to hit his left front tyre changer, obviously a complete accident. You never deliberately do that, but missed his mark. Felix also missed the mark in his pit stop on there, which then set them back. Then Felix retired with a mechanical issue. I believe Pato did finish the race, but obviously with the penalty that he received for hitting his crew member, basically put him a lap down and out of the equation. It, again, was a weekend to forget for McLaren, and this will probably hurt more because they had a position where they looked strong in Felix Rosenqvist and had a strong car in Pato that looked like they could challenge for a double top 10 finish for the team to bounce back from St. Pete. But at the end, it ended with a retirement again, and I believe Pato came home in P15 maybe in the end with a lap down. Sorry, I don't have the I should have had that to hand, but I don't have the kind of standings where they finished in positions to hand from there. But yes, McLaren's big losers from the weekend. Another winner, Marcus Erickson. I think Marcus Erickson, absolutely fantastic. And I'm really excited actually to see how Erickson's season's developed. I think he is going to have a really, really good season this year. He just shapes up, and he looks like the kind of 2 victories from last year have given him that confidence that he's going to go on and really kick on as a driver again. And will it be Erickson and Palou fighting forward, and will Scott Dixon be consistently performing at a high level, but like he was last year, in and around that 4th and 5th spot, not really being able to challenge for victories? Too early to say with Scott Dixon, but Erickson and Palou definitely have come out the blocks pretty strong with podiums in the first 2 races for both of those drivers. Last loser, I think it has to be, I don't want to... Well, last loser, I suppose Devlin Di Francesco you could do as a separate loser from there. Takuma Sato, maybe, in terms of qualified P3, fantastic performance. Not of his own fault, but, being involved in that incident. Elio Castro Neves, I suppose you could have like a joint one of the experienced oval, not specialist, but oval strengths in Elio and Takuma Sato. Both had their races ended prematurely when they could have really had a strong performance. Both had pace within the car and could have hoped for a big result. So yeah, they're going to be my last losers for the weekend. And my last winner for the weekend has to be Santino Ferrucci. I think, again, he re-emphasizes whenever he gets an opportunity in this series, he delivers. And I feel if like a seat becomes available, he's always going to be in the front of the mind of people, whether to kind of come forward and take on a seat for a full-time ride going forward, because he's so good. So good, I think, within the circumstance. He didn't even qualify. He didn't really have any practice time. Did he get a practice session before the race? I'm not sure. Like, this guy delivers, and he is still young, and I think it would be really disappointing if we don't get to see Santino Ferrucci full-time within the series again. Like I said, he may not be the most likeable character. He's certainly had his issues in the past, but I think the racing driver that he's matured into within IndyCar, I really want to see him in a competitive team and given a full season, see what he can do within the series. And you got to say that he always feels like a contender at the 500. He was Rookie of the Year in his maiden 500. Yeah, Santino Ferrucci really impressed me at the weekend, again stepping in. And this was even, at least the previous weekends he competed part-time, he had a full weekend of racing, practice, qualifying, the lot for the team. But in this case, he had nothing and still was able to deliver a top 10 result. Honestly, I think I've mentioned it a lot. Him and Jimmy Johnson were the really big standouts. I suppose Jimmy Johnson can be classified as a winner. I'll put that as a winner then. Ferrucci and Jimmy Johnson, guys that you didn't expect to be finishing in that top 10, delivered with absolutely superb drives. And should be noted. I know it's always weird kind of highlighting results that aren't race victories or podium finishes, but I think both are definitely worthy of big, big winners from the weekend. But yeah, that's my thoughts for the weekend. I'll do a roundup of the fantasy of the next race in Long Beach. Obviously, we've got a couple of weeks. We should be also having a collab with Dylan James GP. I know we've organised a couple of times. It hasn't quite worked out timings, but we should be able to do a collab with Dylan James next week and talking about... What are we talking about? You'll find out next week. That will be the podcast episode. I believe this will be the only episode for this week. Hope you've enjoyed the race review. But yes, the next race, I'll do a fancy roundup. I know, obviously, we want it to be a part of our race reviews. Didn't have time to kind of do it for this race review, but I will get it in for the next one for you fantasy players. And remember, you can always jump into the Indy Fanatics Fantasy League with your email address and I can get you in that league. And remember, thank you again, big thank you to our kind of race review sponsor and our race review sponsor through the season, which is the American Monoposto Championship. Make sure you do check those guys out. Remember, links are going to be in the description. It looks a fantastic sim league. I can't wait for their season to start on the April 9th. It's only obviously a couple of weeks away now, which is really exciting for there. I definitely will be tuning in, and I hope a lot of you will be tuning into that championship as well. Like I said, sim racing has really come up, and those 90s kart cars really did look awesome. And it's going to be great to see how that championship evolves in the virtual world, as well as this fantastic championship we've got in the real world, with Penske coming out the blocks, firing and looking strong. But if you're new around here or haven't done so already, you can like, subscribe, and ding that bell. But for now, you Indy fans, keep racing.